Hi, everyone. Hello. I love this. I have a feeling as I'm looking at my image on Zoom and holding up my iPhone, there's just iPhones within the iPhones within the iPhones. It's like, it's so meta, right? My name is Christina Liu. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here for the second day and our first live day since 2019 of the Boston Poetry Marathon. So thank you all very, very much for coming. I am going to have roll call first and foremost. If I mispronounce your name, let me know kindly or not so kindly. Simeon Barry, hello. Jennifer Martelli, hi. Clay Venturi, Jack Miller, hi. Darren Black, great, and Heather Hughes. Fantastic. Okay, so Xtina Strong made this job very, very easy for me. She had outlined the 7-minute rule. You all get 7 minutes, and the 7 minutes begins when you start to speak. I will be as gentle as I can to let you know that the 7 minutes are close, but I may be too gentle. So you'll see a slight hesitation for me, or perhaps a finger point, but you'll know. Okay, I do want to reiterate that our fundraiser for this year is really a flashpoint in this country, sadly enough, of American politics, reproductive justice, and human rights. So you'll see QR codes cleverly tacked on to different places in this wonderful church, but do feel free to visit bostonpoetrymarathon.wordpress.com for additional information. There is a lot of information in a lot of the materials that we have, but I'd like to thank the leaders of the last hour. I've announced the leaders for this hour, so without further ado, Simeon Barry.
And I just want to say to anyone at home, if you can't hear that well, please make sure you put your volume up as high as possible. This is the best we can do at our low budget, zero budget live streaming. Thank you.
Thanks to the organizers and all of you for coming out. I'm just going to read a few poems. Outward show theorem. I didn't have sex for 3 years because that seemed the most prudent response to freshman year. The first time I made out with the Anais Nin devotee, she put the Indigo Girls' Kid Fears on repeat. And I had no idea who Anais Nin was, let alone the depth of her erotic narcissism. Then Patrick laid down on a plastic shower curtain during the coffee house and shook in ecstasy when Kendra parted her fur coat and pissed copiously on his back. His only contribution, a deep bow afterwards, so that his long locks distributed droplets all over the audience. Sex was barely separated from alarming performance art, sometimes minus the art. As was the case when I met Leo's friend Melinda over breakfast. She slitted her eyes and said she had just broken up with her boyfriend because he was really weak, while rubbing my foot underneath the table. Her naked aggression such that I couldn't continue eating my omelet. Since I thought I had no illusions as to where I stood on the relative strength spectrum, and had not yet figured out that my enormously high tolerance for suffering might be utterly fetching for just the wrong person. Punchline theorem. It was the fear that made me funny. Every other weekend when my dad showed up, my mother would act like he was smearing a gang sign of lamb's blood over the lintel, creating such a gunslinger standoff that me and my brothers had to do 10 minutes of stand-up in the car afterwards, just to alchemize the adrenaline. Riffs on my mother stiff-arming villagers down a well, affixing earrings to the bolts in her neck, getting in our faces like a drill sergeant, or throwing tiny white handfuls of homeopathic pills over us like rice at a wedding. How her alternative strategies backfired when I liked the papaya enzymes so much I ate the whole bottle. But these were squibs, and no matter where I was, my mother had the high ground with her sniper's perch inside the dimly lit back issues of Good Housekeeping. The dead air that made up most of the bag of potato chips she would consume late at night for her delayed dinner. The middle-class fantasy of an affable Jesus with no sharp elbows, who floated above it all while the pissed-off Old Testament prophets broke your kneecaps. It was all buckwheat and burlap until I wasn't slobberingly grateful enough for the gnarled chicken patties. And then the earthen perfume of platitudes evaporated, and I was a stand-in for anyone who had ever wronged her. Gradually, I became like one of those Arctic explorers, hauling pointless crates of ornate china over the ice without complaint, joking about the rotten blubber and shrinking number of toes. So stoic and effective and entertaining because I iced over long before the day did. Soiree theorem. It was the class disasters I enjoyed the most. My 11-year-old brother getting drunk on dirty rum balls at the church deacon's Christmas party and ollieing off the colonial staircase, as my mother receded behind a medieval halo of humiliation, and I read C.S. Lewis in the den, underneath the never-opened leather-bound sets of the world's greatest classics, wondering why the animals were so weird, not knowing that this is what happens when you stuff paganism inside a Jesus skin suit. Snow came down outside as if in a novel, footnoting everything with little moot exclamation points, and I had this tiny undone button of sadness inside at the dyspeptic beach duck t-shirt I wasn't allowed to buy because waterfowl were for girls, and the only humor boys got hurt like antiseptic and was wrapped in anonymous malice like paper around a pound of flesh. Like the cancer test where they punched you when you saw if your hand was bigger than your face. The deacon's house was scented with burnished cinnamon, and I loved it, like all the million-dollar homes I'd been suffered to enter in a post-apocalyptic way, surgically emptied of the cashmere-sweatered inhabitants who didn't know me and my brothers were only supposed to shower 1 day a week because we didn't have a septic tank, just an emerald drainage field where we played capering badminton. And my grandmother paid me a sweaty quarter to brush the iridescent asterisks of Japanese beetles off the leaves and into a heady jar of gasoline. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Clay. I too enjoy class disasters the most. So right on. Next, we have Jennifer Martelli. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's great. It's great to be here again. 1 year after my friend posted a photo of Jean-Léon Gérôme's The Bacchante, head of a woman with the horns of a ram, a woman crawls through a hole behind her medicine cabinet, finds an unused apartment, walls skim smooth, doors hung, shelves for cups, hooks to hang spider plants and lunaria and macrame slings knotted with undyed cotton yarn. She could put a baby grand piano in this living room. She could have 2 living rooms. She posts this discovery to her TikTok, and the video goes viral in a single day. This dream I've had my whole life. In the dream dictionary, the one with the creepy-eyed sun and crescent moons against a blue nighttime sky, it says, dreaming you found that hidden or secret room suggests new strength, new rules. When I wake the next day, I'm sprouting thick horns like a ram. They curl back into me. Nightlight. I'm trying to write about a boy who hit me, but I write about curved things, the horns of a beast, or roads, or moons, or fingernails, or the letter J, or the love of that letter, or the curve of the strange patio in the backyard of my childhood home where everyone's name began with J or sounded like it did, or how I love a disaster movie. In the one with the rock, the moon comes too close, fills the sky, and the waves, they curve higher than skyscrapers, flood city grids, and death comes by drowning. Violence is old. Violence is quick or is slow, is never not angry or hungry, can't be fed. Violence is the horns of a beast, the antlers, the rack, the velvet buds on the forehead that portend a disgruntled, nascent thought, a boy's idea of love. Last night, instead of writing about this boy, I read a good poem. The speaker pulled the curved lips of her own vagina and light poured out from inside her. I want that love, that right there, a buried thing, plug-in nightlight beaming over me. The destruction of the piano was the destruction of me. My problem is there is just not enough joy, or joy is too big to fit through my tiny heart-shaped door. Not just my joy, your joy, their joy, our joy can't ever be shared. Like cocaine in its small white envelope, or the cocaine tucked into that little pocket of your jeans, that coke will be mine. I'll write my name with it on a mirror. Sometimes I have to chop things up to get them through and out my door, my heart door, my eyeball door, my brain door. Joy as a guest never stays long enough. Joy is rude, a fickle flat lever, and too proud of its letters which hang below the line. In some tongues, the letter J, that hooker, can sound like why. Why? My mother loved this letter desperately, like it just wouldn't last. Couldn't have enough of us with joy, all J, all day. Am I okay? All right. Let's see. Forever young. At a little bistro across from the beach, my friend gave her name for a table. Young, she said, party of two. The host asked, do you spell that with a Y or a J? I loved that it mattered, that we were all in the collective dream. Long ago, when I was pregnant, I had a therapist who was a Jungian. He laughed that my son would be the archer, a sage, he said, drawing out that soft G that could be a J. Like most intellectual men, he wore a turtleneck, an elbow patch blazer, and falling leaf colors, aged wines, and golds. My friend, Young, asked if she should see a therapist. Her family was small, yet caused such pain. I could see the Civil War statue over her shoulder out the window where it was raw. The sea had sprayed all over the wall to the sidewalk, offshore storms stirring up a red pulp that dried on the ground. And it was true. My son was born in Sagittarius, and I would dream of arches, of letters shaped like hooks. I would dream of buying my friend's sweet hot coffee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was one of the best metaphors for joy I've ever heard of. It makes perfect sense. Thank you. Next up, we have Clay Venturi.
from a manuscript of love poems. That doesn't really fill anyone with confidence, does it? It's gonna be soiree. Across a crowded room, he motioned to her in broken semaphore. How do you feel? And luckily, she had written a 900-page book the night before explaining why she couldn't explain how she felt. And she mailed it to him, packaged with some crudité from a sad platter on her side of the room. And when it arrived on his side, the party was over. The guests, having shrugged themselves to indifference, and disappeared in a haze of ennui and disappointed sex, leaving them a vast and empty space they could finally wander across as lonely nomads and find each other, read her book together, and agree that the weather inside them was the same. The hammers. Why do you carry that thing around? He asked. Same reason you do, she said. And they looked down at the precious, delicate thing on the pedestal between them, brought their eyes up to each other, he looking for clues and she arranging the furniture in her head for a place to fall elegantly and tightening the grip on her handle. The Arrivalist. That's the worst song I've ever heard, she said. Actually, she continued, it's worse than just the worst. It's like the goddesses of bad music had an orgy. They all came at the same time and made that song appear. Where did you find it? I wrote it for you this morning, he answered. And he started to explain that he hadn't been feeling well. He hadn't been feeling quite himself, that he'd suffered a stroke, etc. She silenced him with a finger to his lips, leaned in and said, I love it like my life. And she meant it. He didn't need a potion to conjure up an end like relief at the hands of a train conductor. Here, she said, I thought you might like to fall off this. And she presented a block of marble tall enough to mean something if he fell from it after he chiseled out a likeness of her. But his hands were too heavy. As it was, his heart an anchor, her face something to buoy his dread, get it off the floor of the sea, turn it into something to raise a glass to at any gathering of doubters. Here's to love, he would say, and mean it like a sculpture, finishing her likeness to perfection by never starting it in the first place. Death or Netflix. Mondays always made him, excuse me, Mondays always made him feel like he wanted to just eat her lips right off her face, sometimes, starting with a kiss, then a smile, then a snap of teeth. I'd rather you didn't, she said when he told her this, but I do feel the same way, sometimes. I wondered about that, he said, and checked her eyes for signs of the truth. Then in lieu of cannibalism, even out of love and desire, they sat, legs entwined, and fed each other sweet and sour secrets, falafel and vanilla chai. Tears came and went and came again between teasing, snark, and laughter. And they argued about whether they'd ever actually argue about anything. They agreed they might, and the dying was easy. All they'd have to do was untangle from each other and start walking in opposite directions. Of a feather or before the spooning. Don't come near me, she said from the other side of the door. I smell like a dumpster, I have no joy in me, and I'm tired. So he walked for 1,000 miles and presented his sad, dusty shoes to her and asked, this tired? Yes, she said. He screwed Rachmaninoff into his ears for hours and presented himself weeping in D minor 7th to her and said, this sad? Yes, she said. He put his broken heart on a platter of food and threw it into a dumpster behind a 5-star restaurant, then rummaged around for days to retrieve it. This smelly? He asked. Yes, she said. And then she invited him inside to sit with her among shards of ostraca, handed him some glue, rearranged the pieces to make a place to nest. And after counting and laughing about everyone they loved, who wasn't lucky enough to be them, slept. How best in bronze to show your feelings for her. 1, organize words into a tiny army to invade the shores of her consciousness. 2, hold your head in your hands and roll it up some Sisyphean hill named, Here is Where the Hopeless Sigh. 3, sigh. 4, carve an immovable statue of her. 5, get used to it until she shows up carrying her love and a jackhammer. This is the last one. Thank you for inviting me to read. On a self-driving couch to Nirvana. They held each other so tight it turned to sex, so close the sun skipped out of town to give them some privacy. Afterwards, they entered the kingdom of overused words. Love was on a pedestal with a sign reading, find another synonym for this one and stay the fuck away from it. They cried at this like gardeners with empty watering cans during a drought, and they used the word on each other so successfully, so correctly, finally giving the word its due like no one before them. And so exchanging smiles, they paid the toll to get out of that place and never looked back. Thank you.
Plato's wonderful. I'm thinking about the kingdom of overused words. I was like, I think we need to find other kingdoms. Next up is Jack Miller.
Thanks, everyone. Glad to be here. These are all old. I've been living in the past a lot because it's cheaper. So 3 poems about, for some reason, bridges and mourning. You take it down. Hic sunt Draconis, which is what they used to write on maps for the places they hadn't been yet. Here are dragons. I've eaten whole bridges before, chewed them slowly to splinters that caught between my teeth, molars grinding dry, mechanical and mindless sparks. To what end? I crossed them off the map in pencil. Here were bridges, here will bridges be again, grown cheerfully back come spring's first rain. Intractable toadstools, weeds of damned connection, traversal's promise reborn, and me stuffed to gullet with matchwood futility, its weight pinning me still. Tonight, I drowned inertia in shots of pitch that burned going down, stressate sulfur and hollow frustration despite this permanent loss of appetite, and felt them both touch to tinder past. I set out for the last bridge southward, stomach bursting with the keen flammability of dire intent, and crossed while spitting up lit matches, hungry only for embers and salted earth. Crossed again while sweating rivers of naphtha, stomping madly in salamander boots with heels of flint, aiming for nail heads. In desperate search of permanence, but found only wood too wet to catch. Denied the salvation of severance, I burned the map, final surrender to heartburn and blisters. I haunt this bridge now, lost and oddly uncertain of which side you live on. This next one I wrote on January 11th of 2016, the day after David Bowie died. I'm still convinced that that was the beginning of the end of everything. Black Star. Traffic is worse than usual this morning. The air thicker, dragging hard on the vehicles pressing past it, the sun lower in the sky, and the opposite color, though no one notices. I pass a hearse on its left and wonder if you were inside it, if you were inside every hearse at once, and if every hearse is stuck in traffic worse than usual right now. I'm dressed all in black, boots to brows and skin to sky, even the rings on my fingers, index and third of each hand, black metal banding the notions of primacy and commitment while I am ungloved. You were one glove out of millions, the only that ever fit, that fit either hand but never both at once. And somehow that was enough. A glove that fit perfectly, but lined with needles, and somehow that was okay too. I never lost more than a few droplets of blood at a time, and they would hang spherical in the air, tiny funhouse mirrors that reflected difficult truths. And the notion of gravity would respectfully avert its gaze while I turned those dark matter keys. Today, nothing is usual, everything is usual. Traffic crawls on. There's an obstruction on the bridge as if bridges have now ceased to function, as if the notion of crossing has gone crosswise or on strike. Your last album dropped Friday, and I've not heard it yet. Deep down, I already knew it was a goodbye note that I'm terrified to read, but every tear I squeeze into the thicker air refuses to fall, floats in the lower wrong-colored sunlight and splinters it into strange wavelengths, glittering like long-lost but newly penned Akhmatova poems, pre-revolution, perfect jewels, facets slowly rotating while the notion of gravity pays its respects until I'm ready to drop that needle. And last one, daylight saving time begins. Spring forward, edict as mnemonic, as you recall sleeping across the vanished hour, springing not, but in the restless metaphor of dream. I signed the waiver, refused the anesthetic, and felt the forced resection, wincing with the clock, our hands wrenched from 1:59 to 3 in the tick of a 2 black nothing. Pain as empty penance, and merely because time travel should ache, like regret. Not your predictable moaning in the darker morn, clumsy from the blood sacrifice of sleep, the ransom of one restful hour for a summer of nightfalls held but briefly at bay. I stayed awake. I wore that stillborn hour, blackest crepe, crawled within and mourned the sinking collapse of an island of maybes. You live 18 minutes away. A phone call takes 12 seconds to connect. A mind can change in an instant. Anything might have happened. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hadn't thought about the dark stories or those of so much suffering, but I'm thinking about it a lot right now. That was wonderful. Next up, we have the wonderful Darren Black. Thank you.
Check, 1, 2, 1, 2. On Saturdays, I'm usually coaching adaptive baseball for blind children and tweens. And this is for them. I guess I'm using my indoor voice this Saturday. White Cane Traveler. Take a right at the Warren Clapboards. Your palm finds the crease it knows. Gather up a summer dust. Haptic conversation with the afternoon. Recall steps paced with breaths. A picket fence becomes your guide. Bowed staves, musty sweet, pass you to the buckled street. To stink weed and the sidewalks split. The pithy prick of a rose tendril. Papery licks of hydrangea leaves. The exhaling of the Linden's Hill. Surrender to the slope ahead, where houses stagger, catch their steps, where wet paint scents the paths, and hostas smother the corner green. Turn here at the dogwoods and to brush along wrought iron spines, flecked and bent and unkempt. Surrender draws you down a crooked line to churchyard mums which suffocate the gritty hour in the throat. Broken stones stump your feet, and juniper bristles, sprawling reach. Map again this tapestry, woven with an even pace. Map again this tapestry, tap, step, tap, step, tap. A single damn word never finished. Was it for literacy I dangled the dead weight of a Braille typewriter for miles? I knew the map, slumping houses, how to repair. The carriage would not advance. No expectation of leaving one word for the other. No story built of inconspicuous dots. A fingertip skims, finds only the margins. A disconnected phone, burned linoleum, a bottle's perfect mouth. I touched a tuberculosis test card once at 7, fascinated by the raised bump that meant positive. My mother, in a vodka stupor, tore it from me. This is my last one. What we refuse to carry. Disability waits outside doors. Disability slinks in city squares. Disability lies in broken streets. Disability masters doublespeak. Disability glares from retail windows. Disability's fingertips are wiped clean. Disability is always well-meaning. Disability clouds the glass ceiling. Disability forms in political mouths. Disability speaks with urban planning. Disability sets a barren table. Disability is not able. Disability is a teacher's dirty look. Disability forbids the good books. Disability is code that cannot be heard. Disabilities predictions are skewed. Disability whose numbers tangle in knots. Disability whose academies do not have room. Disability diagnoses all who differ. Disability preaches there is a cure. Disability broadcasts to tell the world. Disability fogs the minds of observers. Disability replicates itself in murmurs. Disability critiques the every step. Disability lives to correct. Disability places you in a ghetto. Disability insists it knows you better. Disability waits for thinning skin. Disability waits for an invitation. Thank you.
Darren, thank you so much. It was haunting. I thought about that race of tuberculosis moving into the vodka bottle and the barren table. That was absolutely wonderful. It's all been really wonderful. And for our last wonderful reader of the hour, we have Heather Hughes.
Wow, it's nice to be with you all again and on my level. Hi. Thank you everyone who organizes CPM and makes all the magic happen behind the screen, because this is always a special weekend. I have 2 poems. This is one that I have been working on and working on and working on and working on. I don't know if it's been 5 or 6 years now that I've been hammering at this poem, and I think maybe yesterday I finished it, maybe. Tell me later if you think it's good. It's called We Had Been to the Menagerie. I've got the lion all wrong. I'm a lion tourist, an 18th century naturalist drawing from something other than iridescent memory. I mean, you know I've seen lions. Remember the zoo? How we cooed and awed over those gooey plastic creatures coughed from a machine. When I visited the Lion Tower, though, I was alone. London's never had good building stone. Buttercream barbican walls hauled in to consolidate the conqueror's reign. Enough. Paw and scratch as I might, I've excavated nothing. You already know I'm more rock and maw, less fortification. I would rouse in you the wilder stories, disentangle them. Neither dreams nor the dark mane of DNA can quite reconstruct a pair of Barbary beasts. How did they survive the coil of winds and waves? Without the familiar, intricate, rumpled mountains, what supports our sky? Imagine us, love, sea shaken and far from sleep. Imagine now our lion racket below decks. I have just one more. It's a long one. It's brand new. We testing stuff out on the BPM audience. This is part of a long series of poems that I refer to in my own head as the feral poems. And there's a few references in here to things like Shabazz Palaces, Don Henley, what else is in here? Some Camille Dungy, Tim Gunn, and the band Garbage. And a shout out to Rob, who is one of the few people I know who thinks about disaster as often as I do. There's a little shout out to him in this poem. It's called Building the Perfect Beast. The floods aren't as advertised, filthy, reeking of sea dreams. I was born below sea level, decked out for the funeral underground. Tunnels swell, canals thrash. I am not careful, but nothing wakes. The panic and the pain, yes, the panic and the immediate pain are photogenic. Bad blood and ghosts wrapped tight around me. Each hot column of vulture air, each warped beast, each beast lingered, calm, each apocalypse predicted. I want to reassure you, the siren is not the tsunami. If you want me to, if you promise, if I trusted, I would quietly submerge the last of myself. Tell me, does the simulation hold up? Go with your viscera. It's true, I've been obsessed with oracles. So few ways of making meaning make sense. And I willingly traffic with dark constellations and with the reluctant dead. Incorporate that which would silence us. Little known, the day of the storm is easy. All the days after, that's another story. The jagged energy of the buildup, of the windup, of the questionable incantations has to go somewhere. To know the shape of disaster is not enough. With neon in our blood, promise me, we'll map the glow. We'll build. Thank you.
Thank you. That was such an inspiring idea. We'll go with neon no blood into the 3 o'clock hour. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our readers. And I believe we're going to start the 3 o'clock set fairly soon. Do we know who is hosting?
Suzanne.
Awesome. All right, so I think we're gonna take a very short break from
I'm
that.
just gonna see if people in the staff are here, if I can
Absolutely.
do that. We're gonna take a short break, right? Okay, terrific. Ariel LaRue, you're here. All right. JD Scrimger. Great. By the way, if I mispronounced your name, let me know. Thank you. Ruby Polterek. Thank you. All right. MP Carver, there you are. All right. Lucille Clifton. She's here. Heather Tressler. Heather Tressler? Not here. Okay. Emma Melbourne. Great. All right. We're going to take a short little break. Eat snacks, get water, and I'll see you right back here.
No, we never had to touch that, but. Three o'clock is Heather. So,